Okay, it's that time of year again for the NRL season preview. How we're going to do it this year, one video. We're going to look at the finishing positions in the regular season ladder last year. We're going to start with Wooden Spooners West Tigers and end up with the Penrith Panthers. We're going to spend a couple of minutes on each team and where I think they could potentially make the top 8, not make the top 8. I wouldn't say, I'm going to say this team's definitely going to make the top 8, but we're going to have a rough discussion of where I think the team was last year and where I think they're going to be for this upcoming season. Of course, we've got those teams who are going to Vegas, we've got teams with new coaches, and of course we've got a team with a brand new board, so there's a lot to discuss. So without any further ado, let's get on it, because this is going to be a lengthy video. If you want to skip on to where your team's going to be, please feel free to do so. So, West Tigers, new board, new coach, and same dysfunction. There's a reason why the Tigers have only been in 3 finals appearances and 1 overall title, no minor premierships. They've missed finals on 21 out of 24 seasons, and they've been back-to-back wooden spooners. It's the dysfunction in the boardroom, it's the dysfunction in the coaching box, a lot of turnover of coaches, dysfunction at board level, lack of stability. Plays out on the field. Now, Benji Marshall and Robbie Fowler are club legends, great players, both at Robbie Fowler Origin level, international level, and on the field, great players. A lot of games played between those two. I mean, there's a lot of experience there as players. Coaching level, very inexperienced. However, they may come out with some left field ideas and some fresh ideas that have been lacking. They need to be given time. Will the Tigers make the top 8? Probably not. Probably not. I can see a Newcastle Knights, mid-2010s, where they had multiple wooden spoons in a row and some disastrous seasons before this side fully turns things round. But the new board under Shane Richardson is an interim board. They may extend after their 6 months. So, we could be looking at June with, a new CEO and new board in June. Benji and Robbie have been given a 5-year deal with the old board. So it's going to be interesting whether, that 5-year contract, they see out that contract. I think they need to give Benji and Robbie time to really right the ship. But I can't see the Tigers, with all the dysfunction off the field, doing much on the field. I think this is a rebuilding season. I think fans need to lower their expectations. I cannot see this side making the top 8. Same with the Dragons. Shane Flanagan, new coach. Again, a lot of dysfunction in the boardroom, a lot of coaching turnover, lack of appearances in the top 8 since they won their premiership, much like the Tigers with their last premiership, their only premiership. Dragons, same boat, same dysfunction. Both these clubs are dual venture clubs. Both these clubs have a lot of off-field boardroom dysfunction, constant coaching changeover. They need to give Shane Flanagan time. Given time at Cronulla, he did magical things. Of course, there's that controversy with his time at Cronulla with the peptide scandal, the salary cap breaches, and failure to adhere to the sanctions imposed against him. He breached certain aspects of the sanctions against him while he was suspended at Cronulla, which led to his suspension again as a head coach. But he is a premiership winning coach. He does need to be given time to implement his ideas on the Dragons, because look what he did at Cronulla. Regardless of the controversy surrounding Flanagan, he managed to turn them into a winning team. He managed to turn them into a regular finals team that they still are today. The basis of Cronulla's current form is actually based on Shane Flanagan and what he did. Morris and Fitzgibbon have continued that. We're making top 8. So Dragons need to give him time. Ben Hunt, will he stay there long term? And will Carl Flanagan finally find a home in the NRL alongside Hunt in the halves? I think that's a great pickup. I think that gives them 2 options at hooker and options in that spine. Spine is a key area. Keeping Ben Hunt around is important, but other big players at the club need to perform. Lomax needs to perform. For example, some of the other forwards need to step up their game and perform, because they've been not good enough for too long. The Bulldogs, a lot of pressure on Serraldo in his second season. Last season he did say, look, it is a long-term rebuild. They again need to give him time. He's got a 5-year contract. He needs to be given time to also implement his stamp and authority on the team. We know the team can score. Defence was a big issue for all three of these sides. Defence was a big problem, recurring theme. I think they need to tighten up that defence. The work rate was there. You could see the work rate was there. It was the end product wasn't. They signing Toby Sexton was a good signing. It was unfortunate that Flanagan wasn't really given a run in the side, and he's ended up at the Dragons. But defence was an issue. And also injuries really hampered the side as well. To key players, they had a lot of injuries, so trying to keep players fit, I think, is going to be important. But they're slowly making progress under Serraldo. There are teams, I think, that were worse than them last year, but defensively, they need to massively improve. I don't see the Bulldogs making the top 8 this season. They could be an outside chance of being on the edge of the top 8, but I can't see them having that massive leap. But we could be surprised. They could be an outside bet, but I can't see it happening. Titans, Des Hasler, new coach, new philosophies. Again, this is a side that defensively had issues, but in attack, again, can score a lot of points. So attack's not an issue, it's defence. And I think Des Hasler, he will think outside the box, much like Benji Marshall and Shane Flanagan think outside the box. Des Hasler will think outside the box with this team. He will bring some new ideas to this team, and that will shake things up a little bit. They've got a good young squad. There's no doubt on that. There's a good young squad there. They can attack really, really well. They've got options in the outside backs. They've got a powerful forward pack. It's all about getting the defensive side of the game right. And I think Des Hasler will bring that energy and intensity to their training before the season starts. The Titans could be a dark horse for the top 8 and a dark horse to really disrupt the established order. Again, Titans, much like the Bulldogs, much like the Dragons, much like the Tigers, a lot of coaching turnover, a lot of turmoil in the boardroom has impacted their performances on the field. But I do think they've got the right guy in Des Hasler to get the best out of this side defensively. In attack, there is no question in attack what they can do. Des Hasler being the guy at the helm, we could see a something that we haven't seen from the Titans before, which is, really getting the best out of all these players in both attack and defence. Des Hasler, I think, with that new coach feel, could be the guy to really get the best out of this team. I did feel sorry for Justin Holbrook last season, though, with how he departed, but Desi, I think, is that kind of maverick coach that could potentially unlock the ability that this side actually does have. Holbrook was starting to do it in certain aspects, but they couldn't get that full 80-minute performance. I think Des Hasler could really unlock the ability this side has. But will they make top 8? Definitely. That's hard to say, but they could be a dark horse that could go a little bit under the radar and other teams could take lightly. Dolphins, can they kick on from their first season? They were expected to get the wooden spoon last year, or one of the sides to compete. They had a great start to the season, and then they sort of lost their way around the origin period, and it sort of tailed off. And injuries had an impact. It's Wayne Bennett's last year as a head coach, or is it? Will he continue to coach after he leaves the Dolphins? They've got a succession plan in place. They've got the structures in place. It's all about building on the start they had last year, and also they were challenged a little bit with squad depth and injuries. If they can keep key players fit, I think they can be a dangerous side. This is a Wayne Bennett coached side. They will be a top 8 contender. I think the Dolphins, much like the Titans, have Premiership winning coach in Des Hasler. You've got Premiership coach in Des Hasler at the Titans can unlock that side. They've got a great talented side. Wayne Bennett will always get more out of players than other coaches will. Do not discount the Dolphins for being dangerous in the second season and actually building from where they were. I can't see the Dolphins going backwards, but the concern I have with the Dolphins is squad depth and player fitness. There were some issues with some players not being 100%. But there were some great finds by the Dolphins in pickups. They really found some great young, talented players, and it's a Wayne Bennett's coach side. They will always be dangerous. Wayne Bennett is the super coach. So there's that. Sea Eagles. Disappointed last season. They did disappoint. The Travojevic brothers, there were a lot of injuries. They didn't quite have the best season. I think they were still recovering from Jersey Gate, as we'll call it, with the exit of Des Hasler and Seabold being appointed. They had a bit of a mixed season last year. They did miss out on the top 8, and they're one of the sides, obviously double heading for the season opener in Las Vegas on March the 2nd. So there's going to be an added spotlight on this side. There's going to be added pressure on Anthony Seabold as well, considering how his time at the Broncos was a bit of a year and a half of disaster. There's going to be a bit more pressure on the Sea Eagles with some of the talented players they have. They have the three Travojevic brothers. They have Cherry Evans is having a champagne end to his career, a kind of like, a renaissance. He's continuing to put the numbers up. It's just who plays alongside him in the halves. Can Luke Brooks be unlocked as that talented player that we know Luke Brooks is? Cooper Johns, for example, will he get a lot more game time in the side where he was overlooked as a at the Storm? Will Schuster be an enigma ongoing? Will he be a back row forward? Will he be a halves partner for Cherry Evans? Will he be the halves combination part of the halves combination long term, or is Schuster really going to be one of those players who fails to fulfil, his ability and his talent, fails to fulfil his promise because they've spent a lot of money on his contract. It's a lot of money under the salary cap, and there's going to be a lot of focus on them because they're one of the teams going to Vegas to start next season. So the Sea Eagles, they could make top 8, they may not. They're one of those yo-yo teams that's a little bit Jekyll and Hyde. Can they finally get some consistency together? They've got the star talent there. Can they unlock it? Can Anthony Seabold rebuild his reputation following the disastrous Broncos exit? Cowboys, they bounced back to earth last season. They just didn't get started last season, and they were playing catch-up. But they were still in a chance for the top 8. They were playing games that mattered towards the end of the season, but they'd had a slow start to the season that left them behind some of their rivals. I think Todd Payton is a good coach. I think he's an inexperienced coach at this level. He's a Premiership winning player. And he's had a lot of lower ranking coaching jobs and assistant coaching roles. I think he's an underrated coach. I think what he did at the Warriors during 2020 when he was thrust in as interim, I understood the reasons why he turned down the Warriors long term and why he chose the Cowboys. That was for personal family reasons. But Todd Payton, I think, is an underrated coach. He's a young coach. He's a hungry coach, and he expects 110% effort from his players. Some players were a little bit off the boil in his first season. Second season, they were brilliant under Todd Payton. They really bought into his systems. I think they bought into his style last year as well. It's just, for whatever reason, injuries curtailed certain players last season. And they just had a bit of a indifferent Jekyll and Hyde start. But I do think the players have bought into his systems. It just shows if you have a couple of bad performances to start the season, you're behind your rivals and you've got to play catch up. But towards the end of the season, they hit a bit of form. They just left it a little bit too late. I will expect them to be in the top 8 discussion again this season. They need a bounce back. They weren't that far out the top 8. It's just that horrific start to the season. Taumalolo, can they get the best out of Jason Taumalolo as well? Can he stay fit and effective? For them this coming season, because his fitness has been a bit of an issue even before Todd Payton was appointed coach. A bit of a disappointing season. I think they're going to be in that top 8 conversation. There's some sides in the top 8 that I think fall out the top 8 this coming year. Eels, disappointing season last season, no doubt about it. Grand finalists in 2022, missed out on the top 8 altogether. 2023, injuries and suspensions did hurt the side last year. Obviously, question marks over the coach. There were some roster moves mid-season. I think Mitch Moses is a really good player. It's all about who partners him in the halves. really. And there's been some question marks over some of the squad depth. There's been a lot of player movement, but again, extend the coach, extend Moses, miss out on top eight, injuries, squad depth. Are they paying too much for certain players under the salary cap? Is that imbalancing the side a little bit? Did they just have a real poor hangover from the grand final? They again, much like the Cowboys, didn't get their season started and were playing catch up. But on their day, they can beat any team in the top eight. In fact, on their day, they can beat anyone in the league. But they were so Jekyll and Hyde last season that they've had several really good seasons before this, where they've been a regular final side. They make a grand final and then they completely fall out of finals. I think that was an off season for them, much like the Cowboys. I think that was an off season for the Cowboys. Considering how the Cowboys finished the season and how the Eagles finished the season, they were still in with a chance for a top eight spot right up until the last 2 weeks of the season, and then it just playing catch up. But I think both the Eagles and Cowboys could potentially jump straight back into the top eight. Rabbitohs, again, they're collapsed towards the end of last season. Again, they were in a grand final not that long ago against Penrith, and they fell out of the top eight quite spectacularly as well last year, like the Eels. They could jump back in, there's no doubt on that, but Latrell Mitchell, was a lot of pressure on him as a player, and you've got Jack Whiten coming over from the Raiders, and how you fit those two into the side with Milne in the centres, how you fit those three into the starting lineup, considering one's been a halves player. They're pretty set in the halves. You've got Latrell Mitchell, who can play. I think his best position is left centre. You can play him on the wing. You can play him at fullback. Jack White, and obviously you can play in the halves. You can play in the centres. You can play at fullback. And then you've got Milne, who's another centre as well. So there's how you fit those. And those are big contracts as well. Latrell Mitchell, his fitness is an ongoing issue, his attitude's an ongoing issue, and of course Sam Burgess's exit from the coaching setup and his explosive revelations about certain favouring Walker and Mitchell. They're not having to train under the same levels of intensity as the other players. A bit of favouritism there from the coaching setup. Falling out the top eight, the way the season just fizzled out. Going to be a lot of pressure on the Rabbitohs, and again, another side going to Vegas to start next season. A lot of pressure and spotlight on this side with Whiten joining and Latrell Mitchell and Cody Walker. A lot of pressure on those players, because on their day they're brilliant. Latrell Mitchell is too Jekyll and Hyde in games. I don't think he's overrated. He has the skill level. He is a Greg Inglis level of skill and physicality. It's keeping him fit. It is keeping. You cannot compare him fully to Greg Inglis or Mal Meninga or some of these other big ball carrying fullback / centres who you can just run people over. He has that ability. However, he's so Jekyll and Hyde with performance intensity and fitness. There's a lot of pressure on him. So we'll see what the Rabbitohs can do. They could have a complete meltdown of the season, or they could get straight back in to the top eight. But we'll see. They underperformed last year. Raiders, Jack Whiten's moved on. I can see the Raiders dropping out the top eight, and I'm a Raiders fan, so you should think I will be biased. But I think Ricky Stewart potentially, he's been there a while. They've made a grand final, they've made a couple of semi-finals, they've been consistent. They do turn up as underdogs in the top eight. They do push sides, but has their premiership window disappeared? They managed to squeak into the top eight for the last couple of seasons, but I do think potentially they could drop out this season coming up. I do think losing Whiten from the sides, it is a blow, but Jack Whiten has been playing at his best for a couple of seasons, if we're being honest, and that's me being honest. I think there are some issues with our halves and hooker positions, the spine a little bit. We do have options there, and we do have some new signings and some fresh faces coming in. Obviously, there are some players who are in the going to be retiring soon. There's some of the senior players are getting a little bit older. They are a year older. Some of the younger players haven't had a lot of game time. There's some young, exciting talent. I don't think the squad's fully balanced, and depth is going to be tested, and I can just see them slipping out. I can see them slipping out. Now, 2016, they were underdog side that made a good run and made the top four and went on a good run. They slip out for a couple of seasons. They bounced back in 2019, and they've been a pretty consistent side since 2019. Yes, you could argue we were robbed in that grand final, but they've been regularly in and around the conversation around the top eight. But I think Ricky Stewart may have been there a little bit too long. You might need to freshen things up a little bit. New coach, some new ideas, but we shall see. I can see the Raiders dropping out, and maybe the Eels or Cowboys jumping in there. Roosters, another team, obviously part of that Vegas doubleheader on March the 2nd. I can see the Roosters also potentially dropping out. Again, they were very lucky to make the top eight. They had a Jekyll and Hyde season. They're not the team that won back-to-back premierships in 2018 and 2019. I think there is a little bit of lack of leadership within that squad. They look a little bit bereft of some senior leaders. Rawira Hargreaves is nearly right at the end of his career now. A lot of injuries, and of course the Suoliti, will he actually stay the whole season? Will he go? That kind of thing. Will they release him early? Roosters, they potentially could drop out. Trent Robinson is under a lot of pressure as coach, in my opinion. I think he may get the chop if they have a poor start. They had a poor start to last season, Jekyll and Hyde season, and they barely made the top eight. They have been struggling in recent seasons. They've been underperforming and barely squeaking in the top eight. They're not the team that they were, and they are losing ground to other teams around them. So a lot of pressure on the Roosters this coming season. You know, issues with the halves, issues with the spine. Tedesco didn't have the best season last year, although on his day he could be pretty good. But again, injuries, issues with spine, issues at hooker, and constant having to bring players in from reserve grade and New South Wales Cup to plug gaps. Yeah, I can see issues with the Roosters, and I think Trent Robinson, it may be time possibly to freshen up something in that coach's box. He's been there a while. He's won three premierships, including back-to-back premierships. They've been, a competitive side. Last couple of seasons, they've dropped off. Sharks, I think they fell back to earth a little bit last year, but I think getting rid of Matt Moylan gives them more options with the salary cap and in the halves, letting him go a bit early. Nico Hines, I think committing long term was a really good move, although he had a few injuries last year. Obviously, Wade Graham is now retired, so there's been a bit of shift in some of the senior players within the leadership core. But Craig Fitzgibbon, I think, is getting the best out of this side, if not actually stepping up the intensity and the improvement in this side. They've got some good young talent. They've got some great outside backs. They really have evolved from where they were when Morris was coach before being replaced by Fitzgibbon. I think signing Nico Hines was an inspired move. I still think they haven't got the best out of Nico Hines last season. I think that was very hard to repeat his Dally M winning season. He wasn't fully fit for periods last year. Attack, there is no doubt on their attack being top dollar. Defensively, they were a little bit wobbly last year, which would have disappointed Craig Fitzgibbon. I think that would have been a bit disappointing considering, the due diligence he does, and he's highly rated as a coach. But I can see them taking that next step. I can see them being a very exciting team in attack. When they click, when they're on, they are brilliant to watch. When they're having an off day, I mean, honestly, it's still fun to watch Sharks games. And I do have a soft spot for the Sharks. I mean, this is a side that nearly went out of business several times. They nearly went out of business in my lifetime. So the fact that the Sharks are still going, and the development of Shark Park and how the team has completely turned its fortunes around from those dark days a decade or so ago with the peptide scandal and concerns about the culture at the team, within the club and within the team. They've really turned themselves around. They've got rid of the bad eggs within the organisation. Fitzgibbon's a brilliant coach, brilliant young side. They're going to be exciting. They're going to be a regular top eight side, potentially top four side for many years to come. I have no issues with the Sharks. They had a little bit of a disappointing season, but they were solid. Knights, can they continue with this? It was that flash in the pan season from the Newcastle Knights. Can it be sustained? Are we now seeing the best out of this squad? There's been question marks over the coaching at the Knights, question marks over key players at the Knights. They had a fantastic season. Fantastic season. Yeah, the season petered out towards in the finals, but they had a fantastic season. They went on this winning run, they gained momentum, and they fully deserve to be in the top eight. Is that a flash in the pan, though? Can this be sustainable? Is this, can they get to where the Knights were in the late 90s, early 2000s? Well, they were a top side. The fans there are loyal to a fault. The expectation is there now. Much like with the Sharks and the Cowboys last year, a year ago, with the expectation, with their great seasons with new coaches, only the Sharks backed that up. Cowboys fell back to earth a little bit. Will the Knights do what the Sharks did and remain in the top eight, or will they do what the Cowboys is and drop out and have a disappointing season? They need to start the season on the front foot. They need to keep Ponga fit. They need to back their halves that they ended the season with. I think that's the halves combo. Phoenix Croston needs to start at hooker. They had a great combination. Jackson Hastings needs to stay there long term. And Tyson Gamble needs to be given a run in the side in the halves. Ponga needs to stay at fullback. That's, I think, how their spine should look to start the season, in my opinion. If they keep that spine, I can see them building on last year. If they chop and change that spine and have any injuries, I think that could be a bit disastrous. They need to stick with the spine. The rest does itself. Some players, Bradman Best, great season. Just they played out their skins. They need to continue with that momentum. They can't relax and rest. Warriors, again, much the same question as the Knights. Can they continue with this resurgence? Can they continue to be a top four side? They've got the talent there. Fanua Blake, obviously wanting to leave, is a blow. It is a massive blow. It's a loss of leadership from the club. Obviously, he's going to be there for this coming season, but I hope that doesn't become a distraction for the team because they were fantastic. Metcalf is key to this side. If he can stay fit for the entire year and he can definitely build upon last year. Absolutely, he was key. When he was out the side, it was very noticeable that the team struggled. But the Warriors were fantastic to watch last year. Really refreshing to see them back in the top eight. And it paid off with the national side benefiting as well. So there's that. Melbourne Storm, I think that the cracks are starting to show. I think Craig Bellamy has stuck around a little bit too long. I think they need some fresh head coaching voices there. There was a clear gap between the Storm and the top two. They're still going to be a top eight side. They're not going to drop out the top eight. It's where they finish in the top eight. I think the team they have is not as strong as the teams that have gone before. So now we're starting to see some issues with their recruitment depth and overall ability of the side. Craig Bellamy is obviously one of the best coaches of all time. Yeah, they are a controversial team. There's some controversy surrounding coaching style and some of the tactics the team use. But for me, I think there were some very visible signs, especially in the last couple of seasons, but definitely last season, that were very, very visible, that there were cracks appearing in the unity of the team and the performances of the team. They're starting to lose more games than in previous seasons. Some of the defeats were heavy and very un-Melbourne-like defeats. Sometimes, you're going to lose a game every now and then in a close, fiercely contested game, but some of the defeats the Melbourne Storm had in the last couple of years, especially last season, were very, very telling. There are issues defensively, and there are some issues when key players are not fully fit or not in the side. Very obvious that the team are starting to struggle in certain areas. They still finished third, and they were having struggles last year, so it just tells you how good the Storm systems are. But is it time that are they starting to decline? I think the potential is they could do like a Roosters Rabbitohs where they've been at the top for such a long, consistent period of time. This drop off is going to be sudden and dramatic. I can see that happening, but at the same time, they could be minor premiers. The Storm have been so consistent for so long that a third or fourth place finish or a fifth place finish is seen as shocking and unacceptable. But there are some warning signs there that I think their race could be run with the current core they have. It could be a time for some changes, but they're still going to be a top 8 side. Broncos. Last year was a fantastic season. How they lost that grand final is beyond me, from that winning position. But the turnaround they had from the season before, where they just fell away towards the end of the 2022 season, just shows that, hey, they've learned a lot of lessons. This is what happens when you give a coach time with a rebuilding side. This is what can happen. Given that third, fourth season, Kevin Walters has fixed the problems at the Broncos, and a lot of players have come of age, and they've really losing players like Farnsworth, for example, and Flegler. I think is going to be a bit of a blow, but they're going to be a top 4 side. They're back. They're back. If they drop down the table a little bit, I can understand, but hey, they've learnt the lessons from 2022. They've really responded to Kevin Walters. This is not the side that ended up with a wooden spoon in 2020. The players have developed, gained an extra experience, and now they know what it's like to taste a grand final. They're going to want to get back there. There's still some issues with things. They've lost some key players who were instrumental in the last couple of seasons. I think Herbie Farnsworth is a key player they're going to lose. They're going to miss him. But they've unearthed some other talent, and Kevin Walters has been vindicated. I think there was a lot of people saying that he's not a first grade coach. He's not up to the task. They gave him time. So this is where I go with the Tigers, the Dragons, and the Bulldogs, and saying you've got to give these rookie coaches time, because Kevin Walters tells you, is the example of give the coach time, results can come. The Panthers, however, for me, are still the team to beat. Now, if they are to do 5 grand finals in a row and win 4, that is going to be something we haven't seen in a very long time. They're still favourites for me to win the minor premiership and the grand final. I think the gap is actually closed. I think the Broncos have closed that gap. There are some other sides that did make the top 8 that I think are going to close that gap. There's some sides who were outside the top 8 last season who are going to get back in, and there's some sides in the top 8 going to drop out. But I do think the gap is closing. But I think the Panthers are still the team to beat. The systems they have in place are just ridiculous. They've become a juggernaut. While they're favourites to win, I'm not going to say they're definitely going to win a 4th premiership in a row and play in 5 consecutive grand finals. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the chances of that happening are less. However, the one area I am concerned with the Panthers is, okay, Luai and Crichton have gone. Cogger's gone, and he was a key player in that grand final, and also when Cleary and Luai were having injury concerns, he was a very competent player in the halves. Who's going to partner Cleary? They have lost 2 key components of these Premiership winning sides who can help out with the goal kicking, can help out with the creative axis. They've lost some components there, but I think a bigger losses than in previous seasons when player turnover. So the Panthers still favourites to be top of the pile, but even then, last season there were a few games where they lost games that they weren't losing in seasons prior. So again, there's some warning signs there that maybe 3 in a row is their maximum. If they do 4 in a row, I think we're talking about a team that we haven't seen before. Back in the day when the Parramatta Eels were doing this and St George Dragons were doing this, there was no thing such as a salary cap. The game was far less professional than it is now. We are talking about something that just hasn't been done before. Great Broncos and Raiders sides couldn't do this. The Melbourne Storm, I think, and the Sydney Roosters, you could potentially go, okay, these sides have won a lot of grand finals. But we're talking about a club structure and how they're doing it. It's just the talent they're unearthing every season. They're always filling next man up. But there has been a bit of squad turnover. Keeping that squad together was going to prove impossible. And now Dylan Edwards is a rep player finally. It's just Panthers are still the team to beat. So there we go. There's the 2024 season preview. I haven't said definitely the top 8 is going to stay the same. I think there's some sides like the Roosters and Raiders, for example, I think can fall out. And I think there's some teams like the Eels and Cowboys and Sea Eagles, potentially the Titans could jump right in with coaching changes and squad changes. Um, I still think Panthers are the team to beat. Dragons, Tigers. I think the wooden spoon. I think that could be open ended. It's going to be between three or four. The wooden spoon's actually harder to predict than top four. I think. Um, I think we could be in for a very interesting season, and of course we have those Vegas games on March the 2nd, which being a bit controversial, but I think they could be very interesting in itself. I'm looking forward to them. And yeah, there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts on where you think your team is going to end the season, regular season. Who makes your top eight? Who gets the wooden spoon? And let's see what people say in the comment section. But from me for now, from this pond, thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.